Hey everyone, welcome back. I know our listeners are here because they're interested in the latest Huntington's disease research. And we've got a really fascinating deep dive planned today.
Yeah, this new research is pretty remarkable. They're looking at actually reversing the damage from Huntington's, not just managing the symptoms, but really getting to the root of the problem.
At least that's what's happening in mice, right?
Early research, of course, but very promising.
Okay, so before we get too deep into this, can we just take a step back for a second, make sure we're all on the same page? What exactly is Huntington's disease?
So Huntington's disease is a genetic neurological disorder, which basically means it's caused by a mutation in a gene. And if you inherit that mutated gene, you're going to get the disease.
There's no way to avoid it.
Unfortunately not. And it's what makes this research we're going to talk about so important, because the disease is progressive. It gets worse over time. The nerve cells in the brain, they break down, and that causes all kinds of problems. Movement disorders, cognitive decline, psychiatric issues. It's a really tough disease, and ultimately it's fatal.
It's heartbreaking. And there's no cure currently.
No cure. There are some treatments to help manage the symptoms, but nothing that can actually stop or reverse the damage. So that's what makes this research from Northwestern and Case Western Reserve so exciting. They've developed a potential treatment using a special kind of polymer. And like I said, the results in mice have been incredible. They're seeing actual reversal of symptoms, better motor function, protecting those brain cells, even increasing lifespan.
Hold on, wait. Increased lifespan? That's amazing.
Yeah, it really is. But the key thing here is that they're targeting the root cause, the misfolded proteins. And that's huge because misfolded proteins are implicated in a lot of neurodegenerative diseases, not just Huntington's. So if this approach works, it could have really far-reaching effects.
Okay, now I'm really interested. Tell me more about these misfolded proteins. Like, what are they and how do they cause so much damage?
Okay, so imagine your brain is this incredibly complex machine with all these intricate connections. Right?
Yeah, okay.
Now imagine that these misfolded proteins are like tangled messes of wires, just totally short-circuiting the system. That's basically what's happening in Huntington's.
Wow, okay, that's a good analogy.
Yeah. So the mutated Huntington gene, it causes these proteins to misfold, and they clump together, and they just cause havoc all over the brain. But they really target the mitochondria, the powerhouses of the cells.
Right, the energy producers.
Exactly.
So these protein clumps are messing up the energy supply for the brain cells.
Precisely. And without that energy, the brain cells, they can't function. They start to die off. And that leads to all the symptoms of Huntington's.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting, right? Because researchers have found a way to potentially stop those protein clumps from forming.
Yeah, you got it. That's where this new research comes in. So it all started back in 2016. A team at Case Western Reserve, led by Dr. Xin Shi, they discovered this naturally occurring peptide that could disrupt these harmful protein interactions.
Hey, wait a minute. Back up. What's a peptide?
A peptide is basically a tiny protein fragment. And this particular peptide they found, it had the potential to break up those protein clumps, prevent further damage.
Oh, okay. So they had this potential hero, but then there was a problem.
Yeah, there was a problem. Peptides are really fragile. They break down quickly in the body, and they have a hard time reaching the brain because of something called the blood-brain barrier.
Right. I've heard of that, but...
Yeah. It's really hard for a lot of things to cross. So it's like having this delicate little hero who can't even make it to the battlefield.
So what did they do? Did they just give up on the peptide?
No. This is where Dr. Nathan Janicki and his team at Northwestern come in. They engineered this special polymer, think of it like a delivery system, to carry multiple copies of that peptide.
Okay, like a protective shield.
Yeah, but it's more than a shield. It actually helps the peptide cross the blood-brain barrier, which is a pretty big deal.
Wait, so they figured out how to get it past that barrier.
Yeah. And the results, when they tested this in mice, they were pretty amazing.
I bet. Tell me more.
Well, the first thing is the treatment was well tolerated. No big side effects for the mice.
That's good, right? Because you don't want to cure one thing and cause a bunch of new problems. So no nasty side effects. That's great. What else?
Well, the other really cool thing is because of that polymer delivery system, the peptides stayed in the body way longer than they could on their own.
Oh, right, because you were saying before how peptides break down really quickly.
Exactly. So the polymer basically gives them this suit of armor so they can stick around and do their job longer.
Okay, I see why you're so excited about this. It's like they had this really powerful weapon, but it was too delicate. And they figured out how to, protect it, get it where it needs to go.
That's a great way to put it. And the results really backed that up. They saw these big improvements in the mice's motor function.
Oh, wow. How did they measure that?
They used this thing called an open field test. Basically, it's looking at how mice explore a new environment.
I'm picturing like a maze or something.
Yeah, kind of. But the thing is, mice with Huntington's, they tend to be more anxious, have trouble moving around, so they usually stay close to the edges of the open field. But the mice that got this treatment, they were venturing out, exploring, just like healthy mice.
Oh, wow. So they weren't as afraid. And they were moving around more normally.
Exactly. But, okay, here's the really amazing part. The treated mice also lived a lot longer, like significantly longer than the mice that didn't get the treatment.
No way. That's huge.
It really is. And it suggests that the polymer isn't just like stopping the protein clumps. It's actually helping the brain cells recover, like function better.
So it's sort of like a two-pronged attack then. It's stopping damage and also healing the damage that's already been done.
Exactly. And you know how we talked about those protein clumps attacking the mitochondria? Well, the researchers saw a difference in the mitochondria of the treated mice.
What do you mean?
Well, in the mice with Huntington's that weren't treated, the mitochondria were all fragmented, damaged. But in the mice that got the treatment, their mitochondria were protected.
Wow. It's almost like the treatment is giving the cells a chance to, like, reboot.
Yeah, exactly, like hitting the reset button. And that's probably why they saw these huge improvements in motor function and lifespan.
I have to admit, this is pretty amazing. Just this one polymer, and it's having this huge impact.
It really is. It makes you appreciate the power of scientific ingenuity. And remember, this all came from a discovery about a simple peptide. It really shows you how important basic research is. You know, the kind of research that might not have an immediate application. But then down the line, it leads to these incredible breakthroughs.
Right. It's like that saying, chance favors the prepared mind.
Exactly.
You know, we've been talking a lot about the science, but it's important to think about what this means for people who actually have Huntington's. What does this research represent for them?
Well, for someone facing a Huntington's diagnosis, this research it's a sign of hope. A sign that even with this really tough disease, there's still a chance for a breakthrough.
Yeah. Imagine a future where Huntington's isn't a death sentence, where people with that gene mutation can live long and healthy lives. That's the goal.
And remember, this approach, targeting those misfolded proteins, it could also be important for other neurodegenerative diseases too. You know, things like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, diseases that affect so many people.
Right. Okay, so it's hard not to get excited about the possibilities here, but we do need to be cautious too. What are the next steps? How long until this could actually help people?
That's the big question, right?
Yeah.
So right now, they're working on making the polymer even better, as safe and effective as possible. They'll do more tests, and then hopefully, if all goes well, they can move to human trials.
So it's a long road ahead, but these early results are incredibly promising.
They really are. And, the fact that Dr. Gianneschi was personally motivated to do this research because of his friend who has Huntington's, it just adds this whole other layer to the story.
Right. He saw firsthand how devastating this disease is.
Yeah.
It's amazing how a personal connection like that can really fuel scientific innovation.
Absolutely. It's a great example of how science is driven by, intellectual curiosity, but also just compassion, a desire to help people.
Well said. Okay, so we know this approach is looking good for Huntington's. But you said it could work for other diseases too. Can you talk about that a little more? What makes it adaptable for something like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's?
So the thing is, all these diseases, Huntington's, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, they all involve these misfolded, clumped proteins in the brain. It's a common thread.
Oh, okay. So if this polymer works for Huntington's, it could potentially work for the others too.
That's the hope. And that's what researchers are looking at now, seeing if this same approach could be effective.
That's incredible. We're talking about potentially revolutionizing how we treat so many different diseases.
It's really exciting. But it's important to remember that each disease is unique, right? And the specific proteins involved can be different. So while this approach is promising, it's going to take more research.
Right, of course. Lots more work to be done, but the possibilities are amazing.
They really are. And it just shows how important it is to keep investing in science, even when we don't know exactly what the results will be. It's that exploration that can lead to these amazing solutions.
It's true. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the big picture, but I'm curious, what are your own thoughts on all of this? What stands out to you?
For me, what's really powerful about this research is the human element. Hearing that Dr. Ginesti was inspired by his friend, it just shows how personal connections can really drive science forward.
Yeah, totally. It's a reminder that science isn't just about, facts and figures, it's about people.
Absolutely. And it's
Right.
not just about one person either. It takes a whole team to make these breakthroughs happen.
Right. You were talking about all the different experts involved, like the chemists, the materials scientists, the neuroscientists.
Yeah, it's amazing how they can all come together, like a scientific dream team. Each person bringing their own expertise to solve this really complex problem.
Exactly. And they're making such incredible progress. It's mind-blowing to think this research could change how we treat so many diseases. But for now, let's focus on Huntington's. You mentioned that Dr. Gianesti's friend has Huntington's. Do we know anything more about them?
I don't think the specifics about Dr. Ginesi's friend have been shared publicly, but I think it's safe to say that, their experience with the disease, it must have been a huge motivator for him.
Oh, absolutely. It's like those personal stories, they can really push science forward in amazing ways.
For sure. And it just highlights how important it is to support this kind of research. Because every step forward,
Hmm.
it brings us closer to a future where diseases like Huntington's don't have to be so devastating.
Okay, so for any of our listeners who are really interested in this and want to keep up with the research, what should they do?
Well, I'd say keep an eye on the websites for Northwestern and Case Western Reserve. They'll be posting updates on their research. And of course, there are science news sites like Science Daily and Nature. They'll be reporting on any big developments.
Great advice. And of course, we'll be keeping up with it too. We'll share any exciting news here on the Deep Dive.
Always happy to dive into the latest research with our listeners.
Well, I think this has been a really amazing deep dive. We've learned so much about this cutting-edge Huntington's research, and it's just left me feeling so hopeful. Seeing the dedication of these scientists and the potential of this new treatment, it's incredible.
I completely agree. It's a powerful reminder that science really can make a difference, and that even when things seem impossible, there's always reason to be optimistic.
So before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with one last thought. We talked about how this polymer approach could be adapted for other diseases, like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. But what if we could take it even further? Could it be used for other problems, other diseases, like what about cancer or autoimmune disorders?
Wow. Now, that's a great question. It really makes you think about the bigger picture.
Yeah.
What if this technology could be applied to all kinds of different things?
Exactly. The possibilities are pretty mind-blowing.
They really are. It just shows how important scientific innovation is.
Well said. Okay, folks, that's all the time we have for today. But we hope this deep dive has inspired you to keep learning and exploring. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time on the Deep Dive.